Here's what's happening right now. Flooding across parts of Oregon and southwest Washington has triggered flood watches, road closures, and rising river levels, forcing communities to respond quickly to rapidly changing conditions. Over the past several days, heavy rainfall has saturated the region, pushing rivers like the Sandy and Clackamas toward levels that raise concerns about overflow and infrastructure stress. While flooding is not new to the Pacific Northwest, the frequency and intensity of these events are drawing increased attention from meteorologists, emergency planners, and residents alike. What may appear to be a routine weather event is actually part of a larger pattern that helps explain why flooding is becoming more disruptive, more costly, and harder to predict. By the end of this video, you'll understand what led to the current flooding, why these events are happening more often, what risks they create for communities, and what changes may be needed going forward. Let's start with what we know so far. The latest flooding concerns began after a series of strong storms moved into the Pacific Northwest, bringing prolonged periods of rainfall across western Oregon and southwest Washington. According to the National Weather Service, several river basins experienced steady accumulation over a short time frame, preventing water from draining as quickly as it normally would. As rain continued, rivers began rising faster than expected, prompting flood watches for multiple counties. In response, local authorities closed roads in flood-prone areas and warned residents to avoid travel near rivers and streams. Emergency crews monitored conditions around the clock, tracking river gauges and coordinating with weather officials to anticipate where impacts might spread next. In some areas, standing water created hazards for drivers, while in others, swollen rivers threatened to overflow into nearby communities. While no widespread evacuations were immediately ordered, officials urged residents in vulnerable areas to remain alert and prepared to act quickly if conditions worsened. As rainfall continued, updated forecasts showed that some rivers could remain elevated for several days. This raised concerns not just about immediate flooding, but about erosion, infrastructure strain, and access to essential services. By the time flood watches were renewed, it became clear that this was not an isolated storm event, but part of a broader weather pattern affecting the region. To understand why flooding like this is happening now, it helps to look beyond a single storm and examine the conditions that have been building over time. The Pacific Northwest has always been known for wet winters, but recent years have brought more extreme swings between dry periods and intense rainfall. When extended dry spells are followed by heavy rain, the ground often becomes less able to absorb water efficiently. Meteorologists explain that dry, compacted soil allows rain to run off quickly rather than soaking in, sending large volumes of water directly into rivers and streams. Warmer temperatures also play a role. As the atmosphere warms, it can hold more moisture, which allows storms to produce heavier rainfall when conditions align. This means rain events are not only more intense, but also more unpredictable than in the past. Urban development adds another layer of complexity. As cities and suburbs expand, natural drainage areas are replaced with pavement, roads, and buildings. These surfaces prevent water from being absorbed into the ground, increasing runoff during heavy rain. Much of the region's drainage and flood control infrastructure was designed decades ago. Systems that once handled seasonal rainfall are increasingly stressed by modern storm intensity. Together, climate trends, land use changes, and aging infrastructure create conditions where flooding can escalate quickly. Even storms that appear moderate by historical standards can now cause significant disruption. So why does this matter beyond today's weather forecast? For residents living near rivers or in low-lying areas, repeated flooding increases the risk of property damage, higher insurance costs, and displacement. Even minor flooding can leave long-term impacts on homes, vehicles, and local businesses. For local governments, frequent flood events strain emergency response resources and budgets. Road repairs, drainage maintenance, and disaster response efforts can quickly add up. Flooding also affects transportation and commerce. Road closures disrupt supply chains, delay deliveries, and impact workers who rely on safe travel to reach jobs. Over time, these disruptions can ripple through regional economies. Environmental impacts are another concern. Flooding can erode riverbanks, damage habitats, and introduce pollutants into waterways. This affects ecosystems and long-term water quality. More broadly, the increasing frequency of flood events raises questions about how communities plan for future development. Decisions about where and how to build infrastructure will determine how resilient regions are to ongoing weather extremes. In short, flooding is no longer just a temporary inconvenience. It represents a growing challenge that affects safety, economics, and long-term planning across the region. As this situation continues to unfold, experts say there are several key factors to watch closely. Meteorologists note that when rainfall remains steady over multiple days, even moderate storms can create outsized impacts. Saturated ground leaves little capacity for additional water, increasing the risk of flash flooding and river overflow. Emergency management officials say some of the most dangerous conditions occur after rainfall begins to slow. Rivers can continue rising hours or even days later, catching residents off guard. Infrastructure specialists warn that repeated flooding places cumulative stress on roads, bridges, and drainage systems. Small vulnerabilities can grow into larger failures over time. There is also concern about how quickly conditions can escalate. What begins as minor roadway flooding can quickly turn into access issues for emergency vehicles or disruptions to essential services. Experts emphasize the importance of preparation. This includes monitoring local alerts, avoiding flood-prone routes, and understanding evacuation plans in vulnerable areas. They also point to longer-term solutions. These include improved stormwater management, updated floodplain mapping, and smarter development practices that reduce runoff. In situations like this, officials consistently stress that the greatest risks often come from underestimating how fast conditions can worsen. Looking ahead, weather officials say the immediate focus remains on monitoring river levels and updating forecasts as conditions evolve. In the short term, residents can expect continued advisories, potential road closures, and requests to avoid travel in flood-prone areas. Emergency crews will remain on alert as long as river levels stay elevated. Over the longer term, experts are watching whether these weather patterns continue into future seasons. If heavy rainfall events remain frequent, communities may need to reassess floodplain management and emergency preparedness plans. Some local governments are already exploring infrastructure upgrades. These include improved stormwater systems and reinforced riverbanks. Others are considering zoning changes to limit development in high-risk areas. How effectively these measures are implemented will play a major role in determining how communities adapt to future flooding risks. Here's the now brief takeaway. Flooding in the Pacific Northwest is becoming more disruptive due to a combination of heavier rainfall, changing climate patterns, and development pressures. What matters most now is how communities prepare, respond, and adapt to reduce long-term risks. What's your experience with flooding where you live? Do you think communities are doing enough to prepare, or is more needed to handle future weather extremes? That's your Now Brief. If this helped you understand what's happening and why it matters, like the video and share it with someone who should see it. Subscribe to stay informed. I'll see you next time.